Welcome to The Explainer. So, here's a thought. What if you won a war on the battlefield, completely dominated, but you still lost in the court of public opinion? Today, we're digging into Victor Davis Hanson's fascinating analysis of a hypothetical conflict with Iran. And he argues that the story you tell is just as powerful, maybe even more powerful than the weapons you deploy. Right, let's just dive straight in. Hanson kicks things off with this really powerful quote. He's essentially saying the military effectiveness in this scenario is completely off the charts, something none of us have ever seen before. And that claim, that idea of unprecedented success, is really the key to understanding everything else he's going to argue. So here's how we're going to break this down. We'll look at the military campaign itself, then the pressure cooker it creates inside Iran, and then we get to Hanson's main event, how you win the narrative war and actually define what winning looks like. Okay, first things first, let's set the scene. We're talking about a hypothetical, month-long joint air campaign, a U.S. and Israeli operation. And Hanson starts by just taking stock of how absolutely devastating it's been. Now, before we even get to the results, Hanson wants us to appreciate the sheer scale here. This isn't some small skirmish, right? We're talking about a country that's nearly double the size of Texas, with over 90 million people. That context is absolutely crucial because it makes the military achievements he's about to outline truly staggering. So, what did this campaign actually achieve? Well, in Hanson's view, the impact was decisive. He doesn't pull any punches. He just calls it amazing work. According to Hanson's scenario, Iran's ability to fight a conventional war has been totally gutted. We're talking their air force, their navy, and this is the big one, their air defense systems. Gone. And, when you take out the air defenses, you basically own the skies. And this is where it gets kinda wild. With the skies totally clear, Hanson points out that tactical aircraft, think tank-busting Warthogs or Apache attack helicopters, can operate literally anywhere, anytime. He calls this total air supremacy very unusual, a level of dominance you just don't see in modern conflicts. But the impact isn't just military. Oh no. Hanson argues that the real story, the one that matters even more, is the immense pressure this campaign puts on the Iranian regime from the inside out. He basically sees this perfect storm brewing. You've got a population that's already restless, a military that can't get resupplied, and this growing anger that the government's been bankrolling groups like Hezbollah and Hamas instead of taking care of its own people. And then there's the price tag. Hanson floats this absolutely mind-boggling number for all the military hardware that's been destroyed. Potentially $1 trillion. That's 2 decades of military investment just, poof, gone. And this quote, man, it really gets to the political heart of the matter. How does a government, especially one that's already facing public anger, explain to its people that $1 trillion investment has literally gone up in smoke? Hanson argues that's a devastating question, maybe even an impossible one to answer. Okay, so this is where the entire analysis pivots, because despite all this overwhelming military success, Hanson argues they are completely, totally fumbling the public relations. The story they're telling just doesn't match the reality on the ground, and that, he says, is a huge, huge problem. He really boils it all down to this one critical question: are we reporting our progress correctly? And in his view, the answer is a resounding no. Not even close. This slide just lays out his argument perfectly. On the left, you've got the wrong way, using these very precise, hard numbers like 93% of missiles neutralized. Hanson says that's a trap. It sounds great, but it creates this false expectation of total perfection. So if one missile gets through, you look like you failed. Instead, he argues for the approach on the right. Talk about enormous progress while being totally honest that some threats are going to slip through. It's about building credibility, not giving a false sense of certainty. So finally, Hanson gets to the endgame. How do you define your strategic goals without getting bogged down in political quicksand? It all comes down to the language you use. First up, that loaded term, regime change. To avoid the ghosts of past wars like Iraq and Afghanistan, Hanson says you don't make it the official goal. Nope. Instead, you frame it as a possible and welcome side effect. You call it a collateral dividend that comes from putting so much pressure on the government that it might just collapse on its own. Next is the idea of a ground war. That phrase alone is politically toxic. So Hanson advises a really careful distinction. You make it clear you're not planning a full-scale occupation, but you're keeping the option on the table for a limited incursion or a one-off strike. It keeps your enemies guessing without completely spooking your own public. And he also makes a point to tackle a common political narrative head-on, this idea that Israel is somehow pulling the strings. Hansen pushes back on that, saying that even within Israel, the perception is that Donald Trump is very much pursuing his own separate agenda. And this all brings us to the core question of Hansen's entire analysis, one that really forces us to rethink what modern conflict even is. His whole argument is that battlefield dominance just isn't enough. If you don't control the story, you can still lose the war. So it leaves us with this provocative thought. In the 21st century, is the war of words actually more decisive than the war of weapons?